So we have a great presentation tonight where I know there's been a lot of interest in our organization among our members in DNA research. Some of you are more advanced in that than others, but we wanted to welcome our speaker tonight, Jari Honora, who's going to talk about what to do after you've taken your DNA test. Now that you have these results, what do you do with it? How do you make it work in your research? DNA research can be challenging to navigate. There's multiple testing companies and multiple types of DNA tests and results. And Jari will take us through, how to make effective use of all that tonight. Many of you know Jari. He's a certified genealogist. He works as a family historian at the Williams Research Center of the Historic New Orleans Collection. He does professional historical and genealogical research. He's also done research for TV programs, including Finding Your Roots and We'll Meet Again. We're happy to have him as a trustee on our board of GRSNO. He's also a trustee on the board for Certification of Genealogists and a board member of the Louisiana Historical Society. He's a member of the Sons of the American Revolution, Society of the War of 1812, and the Sons and Daughters of the U.S. Middle Passage. So I wanted to just welcome Jari tonight, and I'll turn the floor over to him. We want to use these two. This is cool.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Stephen, for that introduction. I know so many of you, I don't think an introduction was needed for what will be very much an introductory presentation. I was talking with Richard earlier, and I said, man, you could be teaching this course, and I see so many others who could do the same, because this is a sort of entry-level presentation as to what to do upon getting your DNA results back. I find that a lot of people, DNA testing, commercial DNA testing has become an impulse buy, right? You can even buy it at Walgreens and then turn the kit back into the testing company, and then they simply let the results sit there, right? And we don't want to join that number. We want to actually put our DNA to use. Just by show of hands, how many of you in the room have done an autosomal DNA test? Okay, that's almost everyone, and you're not alone. Figures as of March of this year, about 54, 55 million people have done commercial DNA testing for genealogy since it started around 2000 with FTDNA, Family Tree DNA. There are 4 major testing companies, and I've ranked them here as well as on the graphic in terms of the size of their databases. The largest is Ancestry, which right now has somewhere around 30 million tests. About half that size is 23andMe at 14 million, then MyHeritage at 9 million, and then lagging behind, but a very valuable company, is Family Tree DNA, which has about 1.8 million test kits in their database. So for those of you who may only want to test with one company, maybe if money is a consideration, or maybe you just want to engage upon this sort of as an entry-level thing, which company would I obviously recommend? Ancestry, because their database is more than double the size of its nearest competitor. I also find the user interface with Ancestry to be the most user-friendly, because it ties trees directly with DNA results. Now, there are 3 types of tests that we primarily utilize for genealogy research. These are the Y chromosome test, mitochondrial test, and autosomal DNA test. I'm going to talk about Y chromosome and mitochondrial first, because those tend to be used by people who are really, really engaged in their DNA, not as common as the autosomal test. So the Y chromosome, by definition, is possessed by males. So in order to take this test, you have to be a male, or you have to get a male relative, such as a brother, a nephew, a dad, or what have you, to test. The Y chromosome is useful because it remains virtually unchanged from father to son to son to son over centuries, right? Presumably, if you are a LeBlanc, then you should be able to test another LeBlanc who at some point has a common patrilineal ancestor, and you should have shared DNA as well as a shared haplogroup. Right now, the Y chromosome test is only offered by one company, and that is Family Tree DNA. That is the only company that offers the Y chromosome test. I would suggest that if you're able to, you purchase at least the Y111 test. The smallest that they offer is the Y37. If you do purchase the 37 marker test, you can always upgrade to 111, or you can go to the big Y test if you like. I would say start at the Y111, and if you find that you have matches within a good genetic distance, as it's called, obviously 111 out of 111 markers, as the term goes, would be a perfect Y chromosome match, which means that you're related likely within the last 4 to 6 generations for sure. Then you might want to refine that further by going to the big Y test. If you so choose. I should also say, feel free to stop me at any point if something is unclear. Mitochondrial DNA tests are open to both men and women because we all inherit mitochondrial DNA. This is the DNA that is passed down from mothers to daughters to daughters to daughters in a straight matrilineal line. Again, both men and women can have their mitochondrial DNA tested. Right now, the only company that offers this is Family Tree DNA, and you'll hear it called mtDNA for short. Moving on to autosomal DNA, which is the tests that are most popular, and you could say perhaps the most useful for those of us who are doing genealogy research, is autosomal testing. These are the 22 chromosomes that are not gender specific that we inherit from both of our parents, roughly 50% each, right? So think about it as this chart shows, and our father, and about a quarter from each of our 4 grandparents. Likewise, 12.5% from each of our 8 great-grandparents. As you can see, that number gets smaller and smaller, gets spliced in half the farther you go back in time. So when you say, for example, oh, I know I have that one grandmother who was from the old country. She was Irish. Well, if you just have that one Irish, say, great-grandmother, she contributed about 12.5% on average. I mean, it varies, but on average, 12.5% to your genetic makeup, right? So you would reasonably expect, if she was full-blooded Irish, to have, say, 12.5% of quote Irish DNA. And we'll talk about admixture in a minute. In terms of matching you to other individuals in the autosomal DNA database, autosomal DNA is reliable for about 5 to 7 generations. Okay, there are some exceptions. Sometimes you can get to 8, but reasonably 5 to 7 generations is when you can expect to show genetic matches for the various lines of your tree. Now, it does fall off very quickly. Individuals who are related at the 3rd cousin level or closer match in about 90% of cases. Okay, so that means that if you and someone else are related at the 3rd cousin level or closer, it's about a 90% chance that you would be related. If you go further down to, say, a 3rd cousin once removed, it's about 70%, and then it really drops at the 4th cousin level to just about half, right? To just about half. But when you think about it, 4th cousins would be individuals who share 3rd great-grandparents with you. And that's going, that's going back a good period of time, right, for most of us. Now, the thing that most people go to first when they've tested, the thing that's promoted on television, we've all heard the commercial about the guy who traded his kilt for lederhosen, right? That very popular advertising campaign by Ancestry. People look at the admixture or the ethnicity estimates. And I emphasize that word estimates, right? This is not an exact science. They cannot, pinpoint that you are precisely 10% this or precisely 12% that. it is, it is very much an estimate. This is the famous pie chart or circle chart that we're given in our results. I use mine because I don't have to get permission slips and everything because it's me, right? And I don't care if y'all know, if you know my background, because I probably have it on 1,000 websites anyhow. But you see that there is a little bit of variation in what's provided by, say, 23andMe versus Ancestry versus MyHeritage or one of the other sites. It's important when you talk about admixture to realize this. This is the example that I've heard a lot. If we were to take out of some lemons, right? Take some lemons from Italy, and we are magically able to ship those lemons to Peru. And those lemons grow there in Peru for 2, 3, 4 generations, if you will, batches. And then we move them again to Mexico. Well, in common memory, right, in the memory of the family or of the produce farmers or whatever, you'll say, "Oh boy, those are Peruvian lemons. I was here when that initial shipment arrived. Those are Peruvian lemons that came to Mexico." But are they really Peruvian lemons? No, they were just, shall we say, in Peru, maybe Peruvian by nationality, if you will, for a few generations, but genetically they're what? They're from Italy. Now, again, maybe I didn't give that analogy quite so well, but you have to think about that in terms of our ancestors, right? Nationality and ethnicity don't always match up, right? I know Jay and the group with Germanicating Coast, they studied this firsthand because all of our so-called German-speaking ancestors, some of their home places are now France, some are in Germany, some are in Belgium, you know, it varies. So when you look at the mixture or ethnicity results, and you see broadly Celtic Isles, for example, or you see broadly Northwestern Europe, that's why. That's why sometimes it's not down to that level of specificity that may match the family lore, the story as it was transmitted to you. So this is the good stuff. This is what we really want to see. These are our DNA matches, match list. You start with your closest relatives listed as close family, and you work your way back to those who are listed as distant family, right? And as you can see, that starts fairly early at about the 200, 100 centimorgan level. In order to see this DNA match list, and this is just the first half page for mine, there are some steps that you should take to ensure that your kit is visible. You'd be surprised how many people order a test and haven't made sure that their settings enable them to be seen. You should first and foremost go to the summary tab on your DNA results, and then go to settings, which is shown there. Once you go to your DNA settings, you want to check a few things. You want to ensure that you have indicated the proper sex and gender designation. Now, obviously, the sex is easy to understand. That's male or female. Whatever your gender preference is, you can indicate that as well. It's important to do this. In a little bit, you're going to see a cousin of mine who I know quite well. Her name is, she might have somewhat of a masculine name. Her name is Patrick Nella. She was named for a cousin that her parents really loved named Patrick, and the best they could come up with was Patrick Nella. But guess what Patrick Nella did when she ordered her DNA test? She put herself down as a male. So every time I look at the little icon, I have to remind myself, oh, that's not really a guy, that's Patrick Nella. But she has, I can't, over the phone, she's a woman of a certain age. I can't get her to change her designation in Ancestry. So definitely you all make sure that you have the proper sex listed there. You also want to make sure that you have, or it is most useful if you have a public tree linked to your DNA profile. For example, you see here that I have it linked to, in my case, JH DNA tree. What I've done, because I find that people tend to copy your tree, if you have a public tree available and they copy it and then they decide to replicate it and improve upon it, and usually when they improve upon it, they add a lot of erroneous information, is that I've created a very bare bones DNA tree that just list me, direct line ancestors, and if there were any half siblings, I make sure to note those marriages and the offspring of those relationships, because obviously those individuals may have descendants who would show up in my DNA matches. The reason why we make sure we have a linked tree is because there is an algorithm on Ancestry called through lines, which can match you to individuals who have similar individuals in their trees. You also want to make sure, and this is important, that in terms of visibility, where it says visibility to DNA matches, that is set to on. If it's not set to on, guess what? Yeah, you've tested and you're viewing your results, but nobody else is. And I think the whole goal of this is to make ourselves visible in a database so that we can contact others and they can contact us, trying to piece together our family stories. Ancestral origins. This is that adage. This is that listing of 20% Irish, 30% German, 20% Basque, or whatever. I would suggest making sure that this is visible, right? It can be useful, particularly for people who say might be 3/4 Sicilian, but they have that one grandparent who's of French descent. If they can click your shared, if they can click your origins, if you will, and they see, oh, gee, this person is almost entirely Sicilian, they must be on my mom's side. Or if this person is of French descent, oh, well, French, that's Grandma Susie. I gotta, put them on that side. That can be a very quick reference for them to understand where that relationship lies if your ethnic background is visible to them. Oftentimes, you will find that it's useful to share access to your DNA match list with others, usually others in the family who are doing genealogy. I can tell you that between myself, between cousins whom I've had tested, aunts, grandparents, and lots of clients, I'm a collaborator on about 40 different DNA kits, right? Some of you may be collaborators for relatives that you've had tested. The way to do that is to go in, again, to that settings tab on your DNA summary page. You will scroll down to DNA test sharing. When you click, it's not really all that intuitive, but when you click this white bar here that says DNA test sharing, it will bring you to this page where you are able to invite others to be a collaborator or viewer on your test results by entering their email or username, that's their Ancestry username, and then select the role of either viewer or collaborator, and then you can send them an invitation. Okay, that's the only way to share your DNA match list. How did I learn this? By trial and error. I've contacted some older cousins, and they're like, Suzanne, I don't know what I'm looking at. There could be people on here, my mom or my dad. I don't know what I'm looking at. You study this, you look at it. And I said, okay, that's fine. I'll look at your DNA results. In fact, it'd be great for me to have you as a point of comparison, share your results with me. You know what they did sometimes? Sent me screenshots. Printed it to a PDF and sent me a long PDF with all of it. I'm like, I can't click that. That's not a digital, I can't do anything with that. So I just want y'all to know that this is the way to share access to your match list with people. Yes, ma'am.
Jari, help me out with this, because early on, my cousin who has started the tree, he invited me to collaborate with him, and we've been doing it for a long time. Then at some point, like last year or whatever, Ancestry said that I could no longer interact with his tree the way I've been interacting with it. So I can't even get into his tree now.
The tree and the DNA is different.
The tree and the DNA are two different things.
Okay, yeah.
With the tree, I've never heard of permissions expiring for accessing a tree.
Yeah, I apologize. Yeah, this is for DNA,
This is
which I have another issue with.
yeah, this is for DNA test sharing. Now, when you get to your match list, there are several things that you want to take note of. If you will, we're going to kind of like break down the match list. First and foremost, you have the name or sometimes it's a username of the match, okay? Now, remember, these are the names of individuals who have tested whom you match, right? These are, for the most part, living individuals. Obviously, commercial DNA has been around for about 25 years now, so there are a growing number of deceased people whose kits are online. But for the most part, these are living individuals who tested or maybe have had a child or grandchild testing, and they show up in your match list. Okay, why do I emphasize that? Because I can't tell you how many people who see a name like Carrie Crenshaw and say, me, I don't have no auntie named Carrie Crenshaw. I don't have no grandma named Carrie Crenshaw. How Carrie Crenshaw got in my DNA? I mean, I laugh, but that has happened. So just know that this is the name of the contemporary match, right? You also have the predicted relationship. That's the underline in blue. It's the predicted relationship that Ancestry has given based upon information that you've submitted, like your gender, your age, and the age and gender of that person, right? So they're looking at the number of shared centimorgans, and we'll get there in a minute, but they're looking at the number of shared centimorgans, and they're speculating that this is the correct relationship, okay? In this case, they've got that one totally wrong. I should know that person, that's my grandmother. But Ancestry's default was aunt. So again, don't go crazy and don't start the waterworks and start crying. My grandma was not my grandma, she was my aunt. No. If you were to click the relationship that Ancestry has put forward, it would actually show you additional relationships that are valid for that range of centimorgan share, right? And so if you click it, there is an equal likelihood that that individual there is an aunt or a grandparent to me. Yes, ma'am.
Can't you change?
You can, absolutely. For those individuals that you know what the connection is, you can go in and you can change that designation. And I actually had years ago, but I took it off for the purposes of when I made these slides. So that's that. They also will give you the sign that the individual matches on. Parent 1 or parent 2. Have some of you seen this in your DNA results? Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. We're talking about the parent 1 or the parent 2. Another thing that will be indicated right at a glance is whether that individual has a public tree, right? As you can see, these first three matches do. This fourth match, George, he has no tree. We don't like those people, right? Because it makes it very difficult for us to delve into their background because they don't have a tree available. I would say this, always click the name of the match. It'll just bring you to a separate page with that match's name, because sometimes they have a public tree, but for whatever reason, they haven't linked that public tree to their DNA profile. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Another thing is, if there is this little symbol here, the two individuals, the silhouette of the, if you will, of the two individuals, that indicates that Ancestry, using its algorithms, have determined that you have a common ancestor with that person, based on names in their tree, based on names in your tree, right? And in this case, I can tell you that all of these are correct, because this person right here is actually a double first cousin once removed, and I know him. So all of the things indicated in these trees are correct. Any questions on any of that? All right. Now, when we talk about centimorgans, this chart gives you the average number of centimorgans that are shared by people with different relationships. At roughly the 50% level, which is about 3,400 centimorgans, that's a parent-child relationship, right? There's nothing close to that. 3,400 is a parent-child relationship. At about 2,550 centimorgans, full sibling. 1,700, that's when we start to get into some multiple possibilities. At 1,700 centimorgans, You could be dealing with a half sibling. Obviously, that person should be reasonably close to you in age, right? So you'd be able to figure that out. You're dealing with an aunt, uncle, niece, nephew, or you're dealing with a grandparent, grandchild. That is precisely why Ancestry had my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, listed as an aunt, when in actuality, she's a grandparent, because they're, genetically speaking, they're the same, right? They're the same. They have the same number of centimorgans. Now, it gets interesting when you get to people like, for example, double first cousins. This is the situation where a sister and a brother marry a brother and a sister. Anybody in the room come from a situation like that? Okay, I do. If you go back far enough, I come from a set of first cousins who married. Does that explain anything? Anyway, they are going to share more DNA, obviously, than people who are first cousins only one time, right? Who share at about the 850 centimorgan level. And then you have all these relationships going down to fifth cousins, who on average share about 3 centimorgans, right? And there's a range, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, with the parent 1 and parent 2, when you first test, this is how it will be listed. You will have parent 1, you will have parent 2, you perhaps will have some individuals who Ancestry has determined match you on both sides. You can do that. There's, genetic material that they share in common with your mother and your father's sides. And then you will have a group of people who are unassigned, meaning that they were not able to make a determination. Now, I can tell you that in many cases, there are individuals in this unassigned category that most assuredly are on father's side or on mother's side. You can go in and you can change that designation. But as far as the testing company is concerned, they have them listed as unassigned. Now, there is no rhyme or reason as to who is parent 1 and who is parent 2 when you first get your results. Okay, so it's not like 1 is dad, 2 is mom. It doesn't work that way. It's just a random assignment that they hear. In order to determine who's parent 1 and who's parent 2, you have to go in and you can look at 2 things. You could look at the names that are very common in the trees of those matches. So here, you see here. Or you might want to even look at the ethnic origins, or what they call in here, the common journeys. Don't put too much stock in these. These are, excuse me, these are names that Ancestry and their researchers have given to people with common genetic backgrounds, right? So there is no group of people, there's no tribe, there's no clan, there's nothing named inland Mississippi Afro-Americans, right? I don't even know, I don't even know what that really is. But when they talk about inland Mississippi, plus this combination of names, all 4 of which match either a grandparent or great grandparent of mine, I can tell you, this is, for me, parent 2 is my dad's family, right? When you talk about all of these names like Bro and Bro again, and you see Louisiana, that's my mother's family, right? So again, you can look at the ethnic origins, or I should say the sort of geographical origins, or the surnames that are common to determine who's parent 1 or parent 2, and then you can edit that relationship. So that will say paternal or maternal. Now, when we talk about cousins, this isn't even so much, well, it's relevant to DNA, but it's really relevant to all of our research. People who share a grandparent or grandparents with you are your what? Okay, people who share a great grandparent or great grandparents with you are your
Second.
right. Your first cousin Billy, his son is your. Oh, y'all are good. Y'all are good. Now tell the truth. Don't be ashamed. Raise your hand. How many of you were raised calling your first cousin's children your first cousins once removed? Or did we say second cousins? A lot of us said second cousins, right? But we know that through our research education, that those individuals who are a generation removed, if you will, from us, they're not in the same generation, they're a generation below would be first cousins once removed. Likewise, the child of a second cousin would be a second cousin once removed. The grandchild of a second cousin would be a second cousin twice removed, so on and so forth. There are charts like this all over the internet that help to explain these relationships. It's important because, as you saw earlier, the amount of centimorgans shared varies depending upon that precise relationship. So if you're calling somebody a second cousin, but they're really your first cousin once removed, you're going to see that the genetic the number of centimorgans doesn't line up. Fortunately, Dr. Blaine Bettinger, who's in the world of DNA and genealogy, has put together this sort of crowdsourced tool, the Shared Centimorgan Project. Right now, it's in its 4th edition, and it has, I think, contributions from more than 60,000 individual test takers who've submitted their data. And it gives you highly refined ranges for relationships all the way down to the 8th cousin level. Okay, but as you can see, just as was said, starting at around that second cousin twice removed level, or starting at about that third cousin level, again, within 4 generations, you start to see the very real possibility that there could be 0 centimorgan shared, right? So the top is the relationship. The second line would be the average, and in the third line would be the known range of identified people with that relationship from the lowest to the highest. Okay, you can actually plug in at the very top a relationship. So if Ancestry gives you, I don't know, 660 centimorgans, you can plug that figure in to the Shared Centimorgan Project, and it will actually gray out all of the relationships that don't match, and it will keep in color all of the ones that are possible. So it's a good visual way to say, oh yeah, I see all of the ways that this person could fit into the family tree. Now, once you begin this process of analyzing your matches, figuring out who they are, where they belong in the family tree, it is very useful to add them into groups. And these groups can all be color-coded so that at a glance, you can go through your match list and you can say, oh yeah, all those people that I put in green, that's great-grandmother O'Hara's people. All of those people I put in yellow, those are all the Benoits, or all the people I put in red or the Stringfields, or whatever. You do that by going first to the top here where it says create group. It's going to bring up this box here, this work box here. You can enter the group name and you can assign it one of these pretty colors, and you press save and the group has been created, right? The group has been created. Once you've created the group, then you have to go to add. This tab, this button here, add, and you can add those individuals to the existing groups that you have, right? Now, I find that it's useful sometimes to either add individuals to 2 groups or to come up with some really, really refined group names. For example, if you have, I don't know, a set of great-grandparents, Tassin and Madère, right? Well, you're going to have lots of people who are descended from that couple, right? So they would be sort of Tassin hyphen Madère. But then if you go back on either one of those individuals' parents' lines, then you're dealing with people who are, in terms of their relationship to you, strictly Tassin or strictly Madère. So there's some overlap there. And again, you may want to add them to more than one group, which would mean that they would have more than one little colored circle here to indicate that they are part of more than one group. Another way of kind of really, really refining who these matches are is you can add notes. As you see here, you can add notes, and those notes will actually appear right here at the bottom of the matches entry in your match list. And then again, you can just scroll through and understand who those individuals are. So I've done that a lot. You know, there are some people, I have a few great uncles and great great uncles who were really prolific. And just by looking at their trees, I can be like, Uncle Albert's kids, Uncle Albert's kids. I just label Uncle Albert's kids. So then I know I can, if I need to utilize those individuals, I can, or if I want to rule those individuals out in what I'm studying, I can, because I've already indicated who they are. Let's talk about Pro Tools. How many of you here subscribe to Ancestry Pro Tools? Okay, not as many people. All right, I think Pro Tools is a godsend. Pro Tools costs $9.99 per month. It is in addition to your subscription to Ancestry, right? And of course, you can't just purchase the Pro Tools. You have to be an Ancestry subscriber in order to utilize the Pro Tools. What Pro Tools enables you to do is that when you go to a match, right? In this case, this is a young man named JD Weber 31. Initially, and we share a fair amount of, 147 centimeters, 10 segments. So we're definitely related, right? Somewhere around the second cousin level, maybe second cousin once removed level, but I had no clue who this individual was. Unfortunately, as you see here, I don't like JD already because he has no tree, right? He has no tree. So with shared matches, which is a Pro Tool, that's why you see the Pro listed there. If you don't have Pro Tools, you will not have this capability. I am able to click shared matches there, and it brings me a list of individuals whom I share in common with JD Weber. And once I look at this list of shared matches with JD, then I can see, oh, he matches two of my mother's first cousins. He matches several of my grandmother's second cousin once removed. He matches some of the Pierces. He matches the Winston. I know who this guy is. This guy is from one of my maternal grandmother's siblings. Okay, and then from there, because I already had a line of thought, if you will, when I wrote him to make the introduction to sort of confirm this relationship, I was able to not just send one of those weird emails that he's probably gonna open at 2 a.m. Hi, cousin, I live in New Orleans. I'm your genetic match on Ancestry. And this guy is probably my age, which I'm the exception. He's probably not all that interested and doesn't know that much about the family. And he's like, I don't know these people. Some guy named Jari, I don't know. But because I was able to specify in my initial ask, if you will, sales pitch, and I think genetically, I think that you're from one of the Pierce kids. Are you from Uncle Johnny? Are you from Aunt Anita? Are you from Aunt Rosalie? Then he's gonna say, ooh, I don't know this man, but he knows what he's talking about because that's my grandmother. Then I'm likely to get a response, right? And that's what we want, is we want to make the connection, we want to get a response. Then I can proceed to ask him, do you have history? Do you have pictures? Whatever, right? So you want to craft a good statement, a good communication to these people. Don't just send them, hi, I'm a Landry, you're a Landry. You know, that's not gonna, you know, people are busy. They're not all as vested in this as we are. And they're gonna shelve your email if it's not something that they can readily answer. Now, you also have the capability of conducting searches within your match list. How many of you have done this? How many of you have utilized that little search tab there? Okay, again, not as many. You are able to search first by match name, right? So if any of you are that interested and you want to know whether we're, you know, related as per our ancestry DNA, you could put in my name, my first and last name, or you could put in my ancestry username, and you could see whether I show up in your test result. And likewise, I could do the same for you, right? So if there's, and of course, some people do this for fun, right? They know another genealogist. I see Louis here. I can say, I wonder if Louis is kin to me, and I can do it. But more often than not, we're doing it for a reason, right? You say, well, gee, I know so-and-so bro. I know so-and-so Cormier. Let me put them in and see if they match. That's one way that you could do it, using the match's name. Probably more useful is the ability to search for surnames within a match's tree. How many times do we, when we're doing our research, do we find that there's that one great aunt who married a McGaffney and moved to Palestine, Texas? And you're like, I'm from Louisiana. I don't know where Palestine, Texas is. I don't really know any McGaffneys, but apparently my great aunt married one. If you want to know whether those people and their descendants have tested, you could pop that name into this box and see if anybody with that surname in their tree appears. And that would be useful, because if you're trying to narrow in on that line, then getting to descendants who have the surname you're interested in the tree would be very useful. Now, lastly, you can also search for birth locations in the person's tree. This can be interesting when you're trying to do research, say, you know that you have an individual from Alia in Sicily, right? And you say, I don't know much. I just know that grandmother's people were from Alia, Sicily. We have that in some notes or whatever. If you want to just immediately get to any matches you have, you don't know surnames. They could be Gilardoni, they could be Spadoni, they could be, Rigatoni, whatever. You don't know them. But you don't know a surname to look under. You can search for birthplace in their tree. And that can be very, very useful, right? That can be very useful. Sometimes when you have these, big endogamous populations like us, most of us down here in South Louisiana, with Acadian surnames, you may say, yeah, I want Landry's, but I don't want everybody that's a Landry, right? Because you know that we oftentimes have matches if you have Acadian descent, if you have Ashkenazi Jewish descent, and so forth, these endogamous populations. Yeah, you'll have Landry's, but they're not, shall we say, they're not the Landry's we want, not right now. We don't want the ones who are still in Acadie, who are still in Nova Scotia. We want the ones down in St. Martin Parish, or we want the ones in St. James Parish, right? So you can put in the surname, and you can also put in a birth location. And at that point, I would probably just put it in Louisiana if you want to be that broad, or if you really need to get specific, you could put St. James or St. John or Tangipahoa or whatever at the same time. So you can use both of those search criteria. Now, Ancestry and 23 do not allow you to upload your raw DNA file, that is basically your DNA results, from other testing companies. Okay, so if you tested with 23andMe only, that's the only one you've done, you got to buy a kit from Ancestry. You got to give up the money. You got to buy a kit from Ancestry, right? If you've tested with Ancestry, but you'd like to, test with 23andMe, you have to buy a kit from 23andMe, right? There's no way to share the raw DNA data between those two companies. And perhaps that's why over time they've had steadily growing, increasing sizes of databases. MyHeritage, some of you may have done it, used to allow uploads from the other testing companies. But as of about the last year or two, MyHeritage no longer allows you to upload your raw DNA from other companies. You have to test with MyHeritage. They realized they were losing money, exactly. Now, Family Tree DNA still allows you to upload DNA from other companies for free. However, if you want to take advantage of the advanced tools, which I highly recommend, there is a one-time fee of $19. And I think it's well worth it, right? It's well worth it to pay that one-time fee of $19 for Family Tree DNA. Just by show of hands, how many of you have tested with Ancestry? Okay, that's almost everybody. Raise your hands if you've tested with 23andMe. Okay, about half. This trends with what we know. Anybody MyHeritage?
I was.
Okay. Just the stalwarts. Okay, just the stalwarts. And then anybody with Family Tree DNA? Okay. Any men have done or any ladies have you had male relatives to do the Y? Either guys or ladies have a few. And then in mitochondrial? Okay, so you see why it falls off. You see why we still have a long ways to go in terms of the Y matches that populate in our results and the mitochondrial matches. I want to just mention gedmatch.com. I'm sure that some of you have also uploaded to GEDmatch, which is actually a free third-party site that allows individuals to upload their raw DNA from a number of testing companies, including the big four, Ancestry, 23andMe, MyHeritage, and Family Tree DNA. And it allows you to compare your raw DNA across platform, right? So this would be the only way, if by chance you have a stubborn old, parent or a stubborn old cousin who said, I tested with that 23andMe, I'm not doing another spit test, don't send it to me. And remember, a lot of times when we want the elders in the family, we're dealing with people, their understanding of the value of all of this and the nuances may not be there. So, if you got that old father-in-law, and you're like, Dad, just tell me. What you can do is you can upload to GEDmatch, and it will enable you to see people that individual, perhaps yourself, match across a number of different testing companies. Now, GEDmatch does offer for a small fee, and again, it is a volunteer, it's a user-supported site, some advanced tools to look at admixture. I mean, if you really want to explore Neanderthal and Celtic and all of that going back centuries, they have those capabilities. I'm not exactly well versed with them. They also have the ability to look at chromosome browser, and you can see precisely where on a DNA segment you match individuals, which can be useful because if you have those unknown individuals, you can see where they fall, and you can try to identify some common ancestry. One of my favorite features about GEDmatch is that and this is an example of the match list for GEDmatch. You see here that it gives you the person's kit number, it gives you their name or their username, an email address. It does not allow you to send that person an email directly. However, you can click it, and by way of GEDmatch, they will forward your email on to the test taker. And it tells you the source of that person's kit. So if the kit number starts with an A, that's Ancestry. If it starts with an M, that's 23andMe. If it starts with a T, that's Family Tree DNA, and so on, right? So it also enables you to know which one of the independent proprietary testing companies that person did that test with. In addition to the autosomal results, again, autosomal, that's mom and dad's side indiscriminately. It enables us to see those people who match us on the X chromosome. How many of you have explored your X chromosome matches? Okay, we got 3. The X chromosome is fascinating. And I've had some luck with working with the X chromosome. This is the X chromosome inheritance pattern for males. What it means is that men get their X chromosome only from their mother, right? And then their mother got it from both her father's mother and both of her maternal parents, and so on, in that same pattern going back in time. There's this useful fan chart that has been created. You can print one out, and you can pencil in the name in these. That is the easiest way of identifying the sources of your DNA on the X chromosome, right? So this would be the chart for a male. This would be the chart for a female. Okay? Now, I'll tell you, so being a male, knowing that my X DNA would only come from my mother, what I've done in order to get another couple generations is I don't even use a chart for myself. I go ahead and put my mother's name there, and then I get all of the people who contributed to her X chromosome, as you can see there, right? And you can find these online. You just put in XDNA inheritance charts. And again, the X chromosome can be incredibly useful. When you talk about some of these tests like XDNA, mitochondrial, Y chromosome, probably the best known example of this, some of you may have seen that documentary, Buried in the Parking Lot. King buried in the parking lot with Richard III in England. He was buried in a suburban parking lot that had been an abbey church centuries ago, and they were able to use these slowly changing chromosomes in order to locate descendants, direct, patrilineal, matrilineal, descendants, and confirm that that was Richard III. I should say combine that with documentary evidence, which brings me to the next slide, which is that DNA is an incredibly powerful tool, but it is only useful in conjunction with documentary, right? Unless, you know how, you know the old joke, the only woman who can tell you for sure where her husband is a widow. Uh, it's true, it's true. You may know where you think he is, but I mean, the only one who really knows is the one who put him in the ground or put him in the wall vault. Likewise, unless you're dealing with a isolated incident of like a direct paternal event, like you're trying to find your dad, your mom, and their, you know, extenuating circumstances that rule out other candidates, for example, you're gonna need to do traditional documentary research along with the DNA, which means that this is a chart like this, or your DNA database, family tree maker, whatever, your ancestry tree is gonna be your best friend when you're comparing what you know of your family through research with what you can identify in your family using DNA. So thank you all very much. If you have any questions, I'm glad to take it. Yes, ma'am.
I want to know who your bro ancestor is, because my mother was a bro,
Really?
so we may be cousins.
Yeah, it goes back to the Hilaire royal family that were, they moved to Assumption, but they started in St. James.
Okay, mine started in Ivoryville and moved downriver,
Okay, well, I mean, we all related.
but it's
All of us are kids.
from Vincent Bro,
Yes, from Vincent,
Vincent to
yeah.
Antoine,
Yes, same.
to Charles, to John Charles or Joseph Charles, both of them. Then, Louis, Matron Zephyrin, James Monroe II, Emma, me.
All right. That is impressive that you can do that from memory. I know that I've got you with Vincent, Antoine, and I think Charles, and then I think from one of Charles's boys, I'm descended from. So we cousins.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Della, Wendy.
Also have tested at living DNA, which is more used in Europe.
Mhm.
But I haven't been able to, I mean, I got my mother to test before she died. And, we still can't make a connection with any of those people, but
Yeah. As y'all,
it's just a whole nother possibility out there.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. As you all know, France in particular, and a few other European countries, commercial DNA testing, is still not legal in those countries. And now there are ways to get around that, you know, you can kind of smuggle a kid into the country or whatever, but for the most part, commercial DNA is not legal in those countries. And so that's why I think we're not matching a lot of people who we should be matching, is because they're from countries that don't permit it. Or you'd be surprised, also their populations, not being like us Americans who are a little bit of everything, they sort of have this attitude that it's taken for granted. They're like, of course I'm Belle Blanc. Why would I need to test that? I don't need to, you know, and they have this attitude where, you know, they see that as a very much an invasion of privacy to salivate in a tube and send it off to some company and get a list of people you can to back. They don't see it the same. So I'm glad you mentioned about Europe.
These are, I mean, are Irish and there are a fair number of Irish and then English matches too on there.
Okay, I'm surprised by that because England would be a big exception. There are lots and lots of test takers from England and from Ireland. Did your mother also test by chance with Ancestry or with?
Oh, sorry, I had her everything.
You had it everything, good.
And everything.
Good.
And my father's sister for the mitochondrial. And
Oh.
my brother for the Y, and my husband for Y. I got everything.
Good. Yes, ma'am.
Quick question, Jari. Do you know, does Korea are they involved in any of this DNA testing? Like, do you see any participation from Korea too much?
That's a good question. I don't know.
He's little.
A little, okay.
I have two adopted siblings, and if they ever ask, you know, I want to be able to tell them where they can go with the little one.
I'm not, Wendy's saying that there's a little bit of interest in Korea. I can tell you that in Vietnam, there is a nonprofit, I think it's called something like Kits for Vietnam or something like that. And its sole purpose is to provide kits to children of, or grandchildren of American servicemen to link them with their families over here. You know, I know I've had 2 Vietnamese cousins to pop up. And, you know, I've been able to get them, again, almost there. But there's no smoking gun, if you will, that would tell us, who their father or grandfather was.
With the autosomal tests, both Ancestry and 23andMe, they give you a kind of a coded thing, H2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever, to indicate what your mitochondrial is or what your X. Is this just it's different from, would that be the same number if you had an X chromosome or Y chromosome test?
The haplogroup, yeah. So the X chromosome, the Y chromosome haplogroup, you know, matches you to other men who share that same Y chromosome.
Okay.
The mitochondrial also, you know, gives you a haplogroup, but the autosomal, they're on haplogroups. Because it's not looking at.
I know it doesn't, but the only thing I've had is autosomal, but they've patched onto me this kind of letter designation or whatever.
That must be through 23andMe, is that right?
Either one, I think both.
Yeah, because 23andMe does give you the chromosome specific matches, and they have a chromosome browser. So that's why they're able to give you those haplogroups. But the other ones like Ancestry and I think MyHeritage, Ancestry for sure. They don't give you the haplogroup. The haplogroup can be useful when you're looking at, again, I would say your distant ethnic origins, right? Obviously, if you say Sicilian, you would expect to have a haplogroup that goes back to Italy or Greece or Northern Africa. You know, you got some options there. Celtic Isles would be a big one if you're Irish or Scottish. But in terms of usefulness for immediate family, not really.
Okay, with American Indians, for example, are there certain haplogroups that say, no?
There are, and I don't know off the top of my head, but if you Google that, there are specific haplogroups that are prominent in Native American populations.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, in fact, I'm sure all of you know Judy Riffle with Le Comité in Baton Rouge. Judy was able to do that on a mitochondrial test for a lady who had a Sauvages, as the term was, ancestor in the 18th century. And sure enough, she was able to pinpoint a direct female matrilineal descendant, and they tested the mitochondria, and it was Native American. So yeah, there are some that are definitely Native American.
There was a lady in Baton Rouge whose genealogy traced back to a certain family in the Canary Islands on the maternal line, and going back even further, it turned out to be one of the original Guanches. So whatever her mitochondrial DNA was, theoretically would refer back to this woman in the 1400s.
Yeah,
Cool.
it can be useful. Jay and the folks at the German Acadian Coast Society, they've heard a talk that I've done about 2 men with roots in St. James Parish. One's last name is Doley, the other one's last name is LeGroux. There was some evidence that, you know, the Dolas at one point had used that surname, but there was no indication that there was paternity there. And so we had them to test, and it came out to a near perfect test, a genetic difference of 1 marker. So it was useful for something like that. You know, if you have one of these old family stories where there's a Smith brother and another potential Smith brother, well, if you got male descendants, go ahead and test them. And if they got the same haplogroup, well, then we're working with something. So it's useful for things like that, but in a more immediate sense of finding relatives, I wouldn't call it like your first round of testing to do. All right, thank y'all so much.